I think we're going here, fellas. Welcome to On the Bench. I am your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone, joined by Zach Blost and Chris Nee. Zach, how's my blinking ratio to start off? Good?
Normal.
That's not ideal. So let's get into this episode. We got a lot to go over. Florida State is coming off a 39-17 win over Virginia Tech. They didn't cover after getting out to a 22-0 lead, but they scored the first 22 of the game and the final 17 of the game. How did FSU start and close so well, and what happened in the middle of the game? That's something we're going to go over. We're going to break down the game, go over some recruiting info as well, including a pretty significant official visit. But first, let me ask you guys, what did FSU do on its final play of the game?
They nailed effectively because math is important.
Buy or Sinone, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
Taking a knee. We're going to buy?
Always.
Who would Sinone such a thing?
Mr. Cristobal.
What were you guys doing? Real quick. Real quick.
Oh, I woke up the whole house. It was glorious.
I was trying to be as quiet as possible, so I did the opposite. I was screaming.
The turnover of downs, or not downs, I'm sorry, the actual takeaway from Chaney, I was excited. But the Christian Leary touchdown catch, I was cackling like a maniac.
Zach, what were you doing?
I was just in shock, man, because I was watching a stream that was a little bit behind, and Brett and everyone kept ruining it in the group chat.
Good for using a Russian bot stream, man. That's on you.
Yeah, my bad, man. I was in a hotel room. They didn't have ACC network. So I was watching it there, and I was live tweeting. I was like, man, that was a really dumb decision by Cristobal. And then I see my entire feed going, oh my god. And that was, I guess, when Georgia Tech threw the touchdown pass to go ahead. Just crazy, because if you watch that whole game, which I watched most of it, Georgia Tech literally did nothing offensively. The only reason they scored points is because Tyler Van Dyke gave them points by throwing 3 interceptions and on short fields. So that Georgia Tech's offense literally did nothing downfield all game, and then they complete 2 of their biggest passes of the night on that 22-second drive to go ahead. It was insane.
Brendan's game on paper.com probably says Miami dominated that game, because statistically they did.
Yeah, it was 500 yards to 170.
I think it was 453, but yeah, I mean, it was very lopsided, like you're saying.
ESPN had them at a 99.9% win percentile. That's where there's not 100. That's why they don't do 100% on those things, because that kind of stuff can happen. For any Miami fans, if you're listening or you're going to listen, which you shouldn't be, you should just be hiding all week. Just bury your head in the sand. If you're complaining about us talking about this to start off an FSU podcast, guess what? It's my podcast. It's Chris's podcast, Zach's podcast. We can do whatever we want, and you guys take the L.
What do you think was going on in Cristobal's head?
Nothing.
When it comes to that decision,
he's done it before. That's the craziest thing.
I think it's stat padding.
I don't know. I'm not going to play psychologist.
Don Chaney. The theory around when I was watching the press conferences afterwards is a lot of Miami media thought, because Don Chaney, I guess, was at 94 yards before that run, he actually hit 100 on the run, but at what cost?
the game would be the answer to that, Zach. And I think maybe the most damning, well, not the most damning, but equally damning, or just as much, is after the game, Mario Cristobal's answer. I'm sure, I don't know if they do a Monday press conference, Tuesday, whatever they do it. I imagine there'll be a decent amount of backtracking a little bit, but for him to even utter, and it was sandwiched, to be fair, by him talking about what they should have done and didn't do with that decision making, which should have just been kneel the ball. He said we would talk about 2 hands on the football. So to even utter putting your player in that position, it just.
And for context, Don Chaney was crying after the game.
Sobbing, yeah.
Also, I don't think he fumbled the ball.
I don't think so either.
Well, can we talk ACC officiating? Because I'm here for that.
Right, let's get into it. We'll transition to Florida State football and ACC officiating, all that stuff. Let's get into it. But I know that that's a national story. It's going to be talked about nationally for the next couple of days. So as we get into FSU's win over Virginia Tech, I want to give a shout out to Chattanooga Whiskey. They are crushing it in the craft distillery game. Fall is here, cooler weather, football season. That means Chattanooga Whiskey. You can enjoy just a ton of different variety that they provide, and you can get it anywhere in the Southeast. You want an entry-level bourbon, something nice and smooth, they have that. Their rye, awesome. It's a legitimate, a bourbon drinker's rye, nice and sweet. Their 111 proof cask strength whiskey bourbon is awesome. And then they also have their fall bottle and bond just came out as well. I would be looking for that. Their bottle and bond releases are semi-annual, always excellent. So let's get into this game here. FSU starts off by really, frankly, like doing everything we wanted them to do. The offense was clicking. They're moving the ball extraordinarily well on offense with like tons of motion, tempo. Jordan Travis is sharp. He hits Johnny Wilson for 2 touchdowns in the first 3 drives. Run game is going fairly well. Meanwhile, the defense has 3 consecutive 3-and-outs. Everything's going like what we were looking for: fast starts, efficiency, balance. Like that's all there. Zach, how are you feeling? Like at 22-0, you were at the game. Were you ready to go downstairs and start doing recruiting reactions then?
We try not to jinx it. Dane and I are always like very like, worried. Like if we do the recruit reactions like early, as far as like setting it up and like having the story ready to go, that we're gonna jinx it. But no, I mean, it felt like they had the game in control. It felt like one of those games from last year where they would just go ahead big. They'd be up like 30 something at half. Jordan would play like one series in the second half, and then it would be backups the rest of the way. But that wasn't the case, obviously.
It's not what happened. So VT chips away at it, and they end up scoring 17 points unanswered, 2 on long extended drives, and then also a kickoff return for a touchdown to start off the second half. Really, kind of as far as I can tell, I'm going to throw this to you, Chris, as we get into what happened. And it's going to be a complicated answer, but I wanted to go over it. As far as what I could tell, like what happened was, and they're closely aligned, is the defense kind of allows those 2 lengthy scoring drives that lasted about 11 minutes in totality to surrender 10 points. The offense gets out of a rhythm. They had a 3-and-out. They also had a 4-and-out, but it was aided by some things. And I think those talking points are closely aligned. You know which talking points I'm referring to, Christopher. Would you agree with me there?
Well, I presume you're referencing substitution patterns.
No, I'm talking about shitty officiating.
I was getting there. Calm yourself.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, the officiating was horrendous. The officiating extended some drives, and let's be honest, probably took a very phenomenal interception by AZ Thomas off the board. AZ Thomas is out here tweeting bullshit. I mean, that man loves Jesus. He said BS, yes, but he loves Jesus more than about anybody I know of on this football team. And for him to just go there, like, yeah, that's what it was. It was horrible. I know people hate hearing people complain about officiating. The officiating this year in college football has been atrocious, and the ACC has been especially atrocious, and FSU games has traditionally been atrocious. It's bad. Watch that game again. Watch them spot the ball. There's routinely issues with them spotting the ball in that game. Penalties that we can go over one by one if we really want to, but Byron Turner finishes a football play, gets flagged for it. Fine, that's one. But the issue is we had multiple of those types. Ja'Kai Douglas gets an arm around his neck before the ball arrives, doesn't get that call. There's plenty of others in that game that you can point
those
to.
are all happening within a 10-play window.
Yeah, they had a stretch where they were just like, let's take control of this game and do whatever the hell we want with our whistles and our stripes. It was awful.
The AZ Thomas not getting, or the blind side hit, like where he's just
I think 26 popped him, if I remember.
Yeah. So there was a lot. So it all happens in a short period of time, Chris.
Mike Norvell's losing his mind too.
What did you think of Mike Norvell in that moment? Because that was uncharacteristic.
He's not Jimbo Fisher, where he gets so like there's a game in the game where he's just yelling at officials. That's not how Mike operates. He doesn't traditionally do that. You don't see him get sidetracked with going after officials. You see him have a heated conversation once in a while, but it's usually a singular play. There was a moment in that game where he stalked a referee 35 yards down the sideline, like literally followed him, barking at him the entire time. And the conversation lasted over a 3-4 play span. He was unhinged about it, and he should be. It was awful. At some point, you got to say something about it. And he has been very good about post game. And heck, he kind of took some blame upon himself for how he went about it in the game. And I'm not knocking how Mike Norvell acted about it. I'm right there with him. It was horrible officiating. And Jim Phillips was in the house, and I hope he was embarrassed as hell by the product of his league.
He may not care.
Probably doesn't.
Because it keeps happening.
It's horrendous.
It's just this offseason.
But you also bring up the Miami game, the fumble at the end of the game, and that's far from the only bad call in that Miami Georgia Tech game. That was another poorly officiated football game. It's very tough to watch an ACC game. Apparently, I didn't watch Clemson Wake, but I heard it was poorly officiated. It's very tough to watch any game in this league currently and not think, God, those guys suck at their job.
And officiating is a hard job. They make it harder than I think it needs to be.
They get paid. They're professionals, act like it. They stink at it. They're horrible at it. And I know all levels have issues with it, but it is especially atrocious at this level. And it's especially atrocious in a league that's trying to figure out its footing going forward in the future.
So the game gets cut to a singular score after the kickoff return for a touchdown. then FSU responds. And I think this is where I really want us to start getting into some of the more like overarching stuff, overarching of FSU's win. Trey Benson hits a 63-yard touchdown, 60-something yard touchdown.
62 was the first one, 85 is the second one.
But that touchdown was an immediate response to the kickoff return for a touchdown. FSU hits a skinny post to Johnny Wilson off an RPO. Johnny's lost for the game. He tweeted out afterward that he's straight and he's all right. So that's encouraging. And then Trey Benson breaks a huge run. He ends up having 200 rushing yards, Chris, on 11 carries.
Yep.
Almost all of that came off of a scheme that is called G or down. Basically, the guard pulls towards the play side. He's a lead puller. And for whatever reason, that was working, and FSU kept going to it, which I thought was a thing of beauty. Let's talk a little bit about the run game, Nee. What stood out to you there? What worked about it? Obviously, a lot.
Obviously, Benson hits the 2 big ones for 147 yards on those 2. That means he had 9 other runs for 53 yards. He did not lose a yard on today. I think that's a good sign of the ability for them to block up front, avoid contact, allow them to run forward. Lawrence Toafili also deserves a little hat tip. The 28-yard run was a very impressive run on his part for the touchdown. Did a really good job. So, FSU as a whole averages 7.8 per rush. On the day, they actually eclipsed 300 rushing before you take away yards lost, which includes sacks. I think if you include the sack yards, it's like 290 that they gained on the ground. They were very efficient on the ground.
They knelt down. Did they lose some to 300 yards on the kneel down?
They may have. Keandre Jones' block on the second Trey Benson run was phenomenal. Got out.
Probably should have been hands in the face, but that's fine.
Whatever. Pat Payton dealt with that. Jared Verse dealt with that. They weren't calling that because, again, great officiating in that game, ACC. I thought Jordan Travis did a better job of knowing when to pull and keep and do some stuff. They also put some design runs in there for him that he executed. I think he had 10 for 25, if I remember correctly, 16 lost, so 41 in running design type plays gained. All in all, I thought the running game looked good. I mean, it was a big talking point during the bye week. I get it. 147 yards of the 282 came off 2 plays, but those scored 14 points. Like, that's the objective. That's the goal. So I'm not one needs to chop the numbers and say, oh, they weren't that good in the other examples. No, be consistent, and you're going to break some here and there. They also committed to it. They ran 36 times in that game.
Yeah.
There's been some issues with commitment, due in part to a lack of plays being run in games. Again, 61, 62 plays run in this game, still an issue for FSU of play counts kind of low. Mike Norvell's right in the way he disseminates that. Some of that has been third down inefficiencies as far as getting on and off the field in some games. Also, them hitting big plays is going to limit some of their ability to stay on the field. They're not putting together a whole lot of 16 and 11 and 10 play drives like we saw Virginia Tech do on 3 instances.
What do you think that means, Zach, for this offense to get Trey Benson going? Because he's so momentum-based as a runner. At least he was last year.
Yeah, I mean, just talking to a bunch of recruits after the game, and they were all talking about how, kind of the name of the game for FSU in the first part of the season was, their passing attack. And, to quote KJ Bolden, Trey Benson had something to say about that. It opens up so much. I mean, we know what this Mike Norvell offense looks like when they're firing in both the running and passing game. I mean, it becomes a balanced attack. It becomes something that teams have to respect. And I don't think that was the case, over the past few weeks. Like, I think, Trey Benson kind of opening things up, them having a running play that they can kind of go to. I saw Cam McDonald, the former FSU tight end, was tweeting about this over the weekend after the game. He did kind of a thread, and I thought it was pretty cool on Twitter, where he was talking about the team. He was talking about how when they run counter, there are certain things that they do, just from an effort standpoint and, knowing correct technique, where they feel like, they can't really be stopped. And I think that's something, we saw FSU, by all accounts, worked a ton during the bye week, not even just in practice, but specific coaches going over run plays. I think Alex Atkins mentioned in his, press conference during that week that's what a huge focus was. And I think it really paid off. It seems like they really figured it out and how to get it going. I think maybe the most noteworthy stat that Chris brought up wasn't even the big runs. It was the fact that there were no negative plays for Benson, which I think was a huge problem in the first 4 weeks.
Then we also
I felt like,
go ahead, Chris.
and Brennan, I don't know if the numbers hash this out, but watching again first time, watching the condensed version the second time because I haven't had time to sit through the entirety of the actual game again. I felt like they simplified it a little bit up front as far as movement, getting guys to spots. I mean, there was still movement. Keandre Jones gets out, cleans out that linebacker, for example, on the 85-yarder. It's not like they just played forward, but I felt like there was maybe less effort put into moving multiple pieces at the same time a lot that we saw at times in the first four.
Outside of the script they were really diverse, but yeah, then I mean the G blocking, I think they did probably like about 10 or 11 of those and that's a pretty simple so they did clear up the picture. Yeah, and we talked about this before the game, is that Virginia Tech had a pretty crappy run defense. So you had to be able to run the football on them. And you did, and you kept going and you hit your explosives and I thought the perimeter blocking was also much better than what we've seen recently. I think that was a huge part.
Keon Coleman got praised for that by Mike Norvell after the game.
Deservedly so. He also got called for a poor holding call early on in the game that set you behind the chains. But he still found a way to score on the opening drive. So, yeah, there was a lot of good things happening in the offense. I thought the passing game was complimentary. A lot of rollouts with Jordan. He was pretty accurate on the day as well. He had the Ja'Kai Douglas non-PI call, which it absolutely should be. Like, people on Twitter, you don't know what you're talking about. It should have been a pass interference. It impacted the catch because he got
he's wrenching him backwards before the ball arrives.
Even people complain about the decision making there because they're watching Jaheim Bell come open underneath while Jordan's already in the process of throwing. You guys are driving me crazy.
He threw a really good ball on a vertical route that would have been completed
for
35 to 40 yards.
Yes, it would have been.
And if the tackle was missed, it goes for a touchdown. Come on. The obsession where all he does is look vertically. The dude threw 18 completions and he hit 8 different receivers, and I believe he targeted 10 different receivers. Ja'Kai had the 2, didn't have a catch. And I believe his target, he also targeted Hakeem, or was that the singular pass by Tate?
Destin Hill, too.
Yeah. But Toafili, Hill, Douglas, Benson, Coleman, Morlock, Wilson, Ja'Kai Douglas, and Hakeem Williams all targeted. There's only one ball to go around. There's only so many passes to be thrown. And yes, they should target Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman more. And the next guy up should be Jaheim Bell, who was limited in this game and only played, I believe, 7 or so offensive snaps. Winston Wright leaves the team, and I know we'll probably touch on that, but he was the third slot, and yes, slots aren't getting a whole lot of opportunities, but give the ball to your best players. That's what the offense is designed to do and be. Should he maybe look and observe the field a little better? Yeah, I'm not dismissing that entirely, but I'm very much over the talking point of all he does is look vertical. He won't look at anybody else. Winston Wright left because he wouldn't look at him. No. They're going to throw the ball to Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, and Jaheim Bell in that order pretty consistently because you know what? There are 3 NFL players playing on your offense.
You know how I know FSU had a fairly good week is the complaining points are about your probably 8th or 9th wide receiver on the depth chart leaving, in questions why your tight end one only got 7 snaps and your LB1. You yawning there, Zach? You all right? I hate it when he yawns on the podcast.
I only yawn when you speak for some reason.
Yeah, but then people were wondering, is that something off the field? No, I don't believe so. Again, similar to Jaheim, I think he was a little banged up. He was a captain for the game. I don't think if he was in the doghouse that he would have been a captain.
Oh my God. They're 5-0 for the first time since 2015. On defense, there were some absolute dominant stretches against a pretty pedestrian, one-dimensional offense. That's the context. But you start off the game with 3 3-and-outs, the 2 long drives to end the second half. There are things you can do a little bit better, but also, again, those were aided by some things. And really, I think the only part in the game where I got frustrated on the rewatch, Chris, was probably the 7th and 8th drives late in the game when Virginia Tech's able to run the ball a little bit. But I think you were also just preventing big play at that point and just playing for the win. Because the game got closer than it should have been during that middle game stretch, I think we're just playing for the win at that point. But we did get to see a few things, right? Jared Verse breaks out from a pass rush standpoint. BT doesn't have good offensive tackles. We thought that was a chance for them to go and get after it. But the defensive play in general, Chris, I thought was really good. It wasn't just Jared.
Malcolm Ray was a man on fire early in that game, did some really good things there. I thought Pat Payton had another good day, building on a couple of successive weeks of playing pretty good ball. I thought DJ Lundy at the second level had a very good day. I thought he by far played the best among the linebacker group on the day. And then, Conrad Hussey.
Higher Sonone.
We'll get
by
the Turner
group. Conrad Hussey should be a starter.
I don't know about starter.
What?
No, I don't. I am comfortable with grooving him in there and getting him more PT and working up to that point. I'm not here just because he made 2 really phenomenal plays in this game that he just instantaneously becomes a starter, because he is still a kid that is somewhat green in the college game and still learning. That all being said, I think everybody knows how much I like him, and I think highly of him. Ultra athletic, willingly physical, capable of being good in coverage. I think he's probably the best package of anybody at the safety spot that FSU has at actually playing the safety spot. But I'm not one for just thrusting a guy into a starter role if you're not quite ready. And it's clear FSU's not quite ready for that. My concern, I voiced this, I believe, on our last pod or the one prior to it, was when he made a mistake in one game, you seem to abandon the idea of playing him, and that was foolish. Give that kid reps, get him ramped up, get him out there and play. And I think we saw FSU make a commitment to guys like him and Blake Nicholson in this game to do that. So
yeah, Blake made some mistakes on a scoring drive, and he stayed on there for the entire drive until he got into the red zone, which I think that might have just been at like 10 or 11 plays at that point. So like you gave him the hook at that point, but like, yeah, he did. Blake
but that's going to come with a freshman playing.
Yeah,
Blake Nicholson is an upside kid that they need to play.
That is the balancing act that you're trying to strike. You're trying to play true freshmen, and unless you're just an all world, like the most elite of the elite, like there's going to be moments where you're kind of pushing through. Stop yawning,
It's like Hakeem Williams in practice. Hakeem Williams in practice will make some exceptional plays and get very high praise. He's also a guy that probably draws more fire from the staff than most others on offense, because he makes freshman mistakes and he has moments where, you know, he doesn't get the right depth, doesn't turn the right way, doesn't block the guy he's supposed to block. Not trying to say Hakeem's been bad in practice, just saying there's those moments where it's noticeable he is getting coached up somewhat aggressively. Again, it's investment. They believe in the kid. They run him out there as soon as they can in a game. They want to get him targets. They want to get him plays. But that's what they're going to do. I thought Mike Norvell's quote in the press conference about freshmen is pretty much their view on freshmen, which is they're not in a rush to play a guy, just play a guy to say they played a guy. But they do want to run these guys out there. They do want to play them because they do believe they can contribute and help them now and in the future.
You know who the number 1 ranked PFF?
Conrad Hussey, buddy.
I appreciate everyone.
I'm here for it.
Appreciate everyone grabbing that photo I did and giving me proper attribution for the research I was doing at 7:30 in the morning. That's cool. Yeah, Conrad Hussey, really good. I'm fun with he played 20-something snaps. I'm fine with that in the rotation right now, because you don't want to put – it's this balancing act. He played well with the reps he had. He also had some moments early on where he was a little tentative and wasn't as quick to trigger downhill a few times as you would like him to be.
Was he the one that Shaheem was – it was him and Greedy, right, on the side together, and Shaheem was directing traffic pre-snap on a play?
I think correctly? Because Conrad, yes. So
that's an example of he's learning on the job. So
right.
I'm all for him becoming a starter. I'm not just here to award him the startership because, well, he had one good game. I think more so it's about gradually improving his ability to play reps and seeing how it goes. And if it gets there, then let it get there naturally.
That hit, though.
Hell yeah.
The trigger and the vision, the tunnel speed, that was
I was excited. I was awake. I woke up twice on that day. That and the end of the Miami game. Wide awake for both of those.
The desk next to me moved.
No comment.
Let's see. What else do we want to talk about this game? Oh, okay. So go ahead, Chris.
I mean, to me, as I think about a game afterwards and then rewatch and whatnot, I thought overall FSU really controlled more than 75% of this game. That second quarter is, you don't want football to go that way. You got to get off the field. You can't allow 27 plays versus I think it was 7.
Yeah.
For FSU, you just can't allow that. That's not something that's operational. It doesn't work. It's not the way it should be done.
Do we think, Chris, that's kind of what this team is at this point?
They allow 1 or 2 of those seemingly pretty much every game. Yeah.
Do you think?
And they kind of so part of my concern is well, go ahead, Zach.
What were you going to say, Zach?
I was going to say subs.
What do you think?
Well, the Nicholson drive, when they cross the 50, it's clear they're kind of building some momentum. I was surprised they didn't go back to more the experience unit in that case. But I also get the idea is you got to give them an opportunity to prove you can do it. So
right, you didn't like the quick hook with Conrad Hussey against BC. So
I didn't like the fact that he pulled him and never played him again. It's more so you're in the second quarter of a game. You're still in the point where you're trying to put the game away maybe early, and you're allowed to play a lot of subs late if you put a game away early. It would not be the worst thing for FSU to have killer instinct in the second quarter and truly put a game away instead of it being a 5-point game at some point early in the third quarter.
To me, like, are quality snaps for a true freshman, like, is that not good to play after the game's already squared away? Like, are you trying to get them in when the game's still in?
Yeah, there are.
I think
different. Like,
I think there's a degree of a belief of the competitiveness of the opponent factoring into those reps, and I think that's why they're trying to get them some burn there in the third or fourth series of a game versus just waiting for when the scoreboard is lopsided.
To me, like, I feel like that's a better spot to maybe use some of those subs. Like, they've done it consistently. Like, if they go up, like, they'll take some of their top guys off the field for a drive or two. But to me, if the game's still in question, which I know they were up 22-0, but it still was, like, you got to score at least one more time, I think. Put it away.
But there's also like a level, Zach, of like preparation to it too. It's like you go into a game a lot of time, like on defense, they'll be like, okay, this safety is going in the third series of the game, and this guy, like I think Blake Nicholson was very clear, this is the fourth series of the game. You're going to get a chance here, and so like you have practice for that during the week, or you tell the player that, and then you don't do it. Like there's you're diluting trust then too.
So when they got in the red zone, they went back to base original defense, right? At least a majority of the 11 on the field were guys that are starter types for FSU, correct?
I believe so, yes.
So I was listening to an NFL game yesterday coming back from campus after stalking LJ McCray and company and watching the end of the soccer match. And somebody on the radio made a good point, and I forget who it was. Might have been Barrett on college radio, that college football so much has become red zone percentage game. Of the team that scores a higher percentage in the red zone touchdown wise is going to win versus playing good red zone defense and getting stops. FSU is super efficient offensively in the red zone, scoring touchdowns 80% of the time, and they're 100% on scoring in the red zone this year. They're averaging, I think, over 6 points per red zone visit. It's probably one of the best averages in the country.
Touchdown rate matter. Their touchdown rate is currently 80%. That's sixth nationally. Only 1, 2, 3 like Power 5 teams are better than them. Yeah,
and really defensively, FSU has been pretty good in the red zone, especially at forcing plays in the red zone. So I think there's a degree of that's a mentality to FSU when they are going with these early subs. Of when it gets down there into the tight zone, the red zone, we will lean in on the guys we truly believe in and believe we can get a stop. And they did in one of those cases. Tootin ends up scoring a 5-yard touchdown. They did in the other case where they settled for a field goal.
Isn't this also like? At least I think there's an element of they're playing for more than just a singular game.
Yeah, they're trying to build the depth. And, I mean, you talked about it last week, Brendan. Mike Norvell teams tend to play the best in November, and there's a reason for that. They build the roster through the process of the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season of real-time action, whether it's in practice or in games. But, yeah, they definitely do that. There's an intention to it. And we're nitpicking here. I mean, FSU won by 3+ touchdowns in a game where they gave up a kick return for the first time in 19 years, breaking the longest streak in the nation. So like, if they don't give up that kick return, it's a lopsided game. They cover, it is what it is, but we are nitpicking. But that's what you do on a podcast, right? That's why everybody has one.
That's why we're here. I think the last nitpicky thing, and then the someone let me know, overarching is, so the last nitpicky thing is, I think my concern with like going back to the long drive, Zach mentioned substitution methods, is like it's not complementary. And obviously you don't want to go and allow a long scoring drive, but like it's football, it's going to happen. The issue is the offense is so big play reliant, is that sometimes those don't always fit. Like you want to get the ball back to the offense. If that's what it's going to be, this like home run chunk offense, which Mike Norvell offenses typically are, and they're not a great like 3, 4, 5 yards at a time type of team. Like you want to get the ball back to them, so you just keep getting more attempts to go and hit home run ball. When you have a bend don't break type of defense, that doesn't always like play into what you're like when you fail. When you fail, it's also hurting the offense as well. Sorry, Zach.
Exactly. Yeah, you're allowing the other team to drive down the field and take chunks out of the clock. I think you're right. Like it's not complementary to the style of offense they're playing this year.
Yeah, to the whole point, VT ran 24 plays for 146 yards and 10 points over 10 minutes and
It
57 seconds.
was about 11 of game
In
time.
between that, FSU had 3 plays for -3 yards and 156.
And then also your offense, if they're able to sustain a drive, which again, there was a lot of BS in that second drive, but it came off of a 3 and out too. So you had a 3-play drive, a 4-play drive, and that 4-play drive was meh. But there's like a momentum in a groove, and play caller gets in a groove. Quarterback needs to have a feel, like that all matters. That's all part of it. But hey, like again, you're a better team. You control the game from wire to wire. Got a little closer than it need to be, but you won. And I think like for me, positively, one, I think defensively they stayed aggressive for the most part. I don't think they blitzed as much as they did the week before, but we've talked about like aggressive just doesn't mean blitzing. There were plenty of times where they allowed their 4 defensive linemen to go after it. Far less mush push, especially early on in some high leverage situations. The other side of that, the offense I thought looked like the closest thing that we've wanted to look like this season in terms of the balance on the opening script, getting Jordan moving around, him being willing to run the football, balance where he's throwing the like that all looked the way like you're working to something there. I think you figured some things out during the bye week, and now you just got to keep building on it. So those are positives.
On the defensive aggressiveness, a 4th and 22 where Drones gains 21 and they almost do it. I thought that 3-play stretch, and obviously they almost gave up a 4th and 22. It would be a very different conversation if they had. I thought that 3-play stretch from an aggressiveness defensive standpoint was really good. They just missed on the 4th and 22, but they had 3 down linemen in the backfield pressuring Drones when he stepped up. The issue was that fullback got going down the field.
They're almost too aggressive in the way those guys attack because all 3 of them went after the quarterback and were diving rather than playing like. So it was almost the opposite.
But I get you want people at the sticks, but Drones throwing a ball 30 yards in the air, say 6-yard drop or so, and going beyond the 6 is 28, 29 yards. He ain't made to do that. So like I would have been fine with somebody living a little bit more in the middle of the field to try to halt that progression forward that he had.
VT was 2 of 13 on 3rd downs. Now they were 3 of 4 on 4th downs to kind of alter that a little bit, but you forced them to play behind the sticks a lot throughout the game. So overall, really good game for Florida State. Battle's End. They're asking for $50 after getting the 5th win of the season. I think that's a very reasonable thing. That's the least that you can do because if you like having a good roster that keeps winning football games, and FSU has what, 11 wins in a row now, Chris?
11 wins in a row and 30 or more points in all of them.
Roster building isn't a free thing anymore in college football. It hasn't been for a long time, but you actually have a chance to donate and help out. The Battle's End is where you can go. Let's pick up sponsored by Battle's End, a player of the game on each side of the ball. I will start off on offense with a real difficult one, Trey Benson.
Yep. Honorable mention to Johnny Wilson for 2 touchdowns, first touchdown catches of the season for Johnny.
I'm going to steal Chris's thunder. Conrad Hussey.
Ooh, on defense. Okay.
I mean, he made a game-changing play with the fumble and fumble recovery. And then obviously had that big hit and a few other great plays in coverage. So
Jared Verse had a really good day too. 2 sacks, 3 tackles overall. He's in that. I think Deloach was the leading tackler, but I actually thought Lundy out of the 2 backers played the better game.
I thought Omar Graham actually had a nice game at linebacker. I got to give him credit. I think he's settling in a little bit. But Jared Verse for me, 2 sacks, and you kind of see him break through a little bit, and just the burst off the ball is crazy.
So real quick before we get to recruiting, I'll do a little trivia here brought to you by Football Coach College Dynasty, which you can get on Steam. It has had a little price hike, but it's well worth it. Just ask Zach. It's all he does now.
Please remember
his wife has left him. I'm joking about it. She very much loves him. FSU under Mike Norvell, when they score 30 or more points, what's their record?
Wait, I'm still getting over Zach's married?
Yeah, basically. I mean, you say in the shadows, just be honest about it in the light.
What in the world? They're undefeated.
Nope, incorrect. 21-1.
What was the one loss?
You should have.
Zach, I didn't look up that part of the trivia, buddy. I'll look at it now. While you do recruiting, I'll look it up right now.
All right, Zach, we got recruiting and also a transaction, a roster shift to talk about as well. This segment sponsored by Football Coach College Dynasty.
Yeah, Football Coach College Dynasty is the best college football management game. It's available on Steam, like Chris said, on PC only right now. My favorite thing in this game is recruiting, and a large portion of what I do now is, in the off season, you can invest in a couple things. My favorite thing to invest in is actually facilities, because if you invest in your facilities, sorry, getting into the weeds here, but this is a really good game strategy for those that are playing Football Coach College Dynasty.
Really allowing Chris to research the 21 and
I got
giving
the
him
answer. It's,
some time.
it's Notre Dame. Opener
Okay.
in 21. Overtime
makes
loss.
sense. Yeah,
Overtime, right?
overtime.
41-38.
Yeah. All right, let me finish my game strategy
Yeah,
here.
you have at
So,
Zach. Go ahead.
in Football Coach College Dynasty, if you invest in facilities in the offseason, your players are going to develop at a higher rate. So their overalls are going to get better. They're going to get better in, various stats. And that's honestly one of my favorite parts of the game right now, is kind of seeing, you recruit. Like, what I focus on with recruiting is I take guys that are really high upside. So they might be low overall, but they'll have B+ or A+ upside. And over the offseason, if your facilities are high, they're going to gain a bunch of overall and be dudes for you in the long run.
Thanks, Zach, for the in-depth strategy
I got you guys.
on Football Coach College Dynasty. It is a legitimately fun game. Don't let Zach rambling about it ruin it for you. It is a blast. Before we get into some of the recruiting stuff from this weekend, let's talk about the Winston Wright departure. We were able to report last night that Winston Wright is no longer on Florida State's roster. Dug around a little bit on it yesterday, fellas, and into this morning. Apparently, he cleaned out his locker after the Virginia Tech game, so it seemed like it was, and he didn't play other than, I think, a little bit on special teams. So no snaps. Ja'Kai Douglas returns from an injury, gets in automatically over him. Destin Hill in there too. Seems very much like it was an opportunity thing. At least that's part of the story. So Winston Wright no longer on the roster. Anything else we have for that? Chris is muted. That's good. It's good podcasting. Also, I didn't set you up very well. Not good on my part, too. Zach was off on the ad read. Just not a great minute, honestly. Peek behind the curtain. That sucked.
It just stinks for Wright that it never got on track. The car accident, obviously, nobody's in control with that. So, it stole last season from him. May have stole a little bit of his athleticism, at least in the short term. I hate it for the kid. Yeah. When he transferred in, ultra excited. FSU needed it. Part of the upgrading of the wide receiver room. Didn't work out. I presume he'll try to pursue one more year elsewhere. I actually had a college coach reach out to me last night who's familiar with him and at a different institution now and might, kick the tires.
Ooh, I'll put in a show crystal ball. UCF.
No, I don't think it's getting quite that far yet, buddy.
No, I am. I'm putting it in. UCF is where I'm going. I'm not asking for you to reveal your coach and staff source. Ultimately, this can be a couple of different avenues of how you view it. And I think collectively we all were really hopeful for him, for that story to be a comeback one that was enjoyable. And he got on the field. He's actually doing pretty well on kickoff returns, only 3 returns, but 24.5 yards per return is actually pretty good. So he's made the comeback. He's playing football again. And that is a cool story. And we wanted him to be used more or to see him more. But ultimately, this is where I can be rational about it, is he wasn't an integral part of your offense this year. His role was actually diminishing. It was going to continue to diminish with Ja'Kai Douglas coming back. You obviously want to get Destin Hill reps. In the grand scheme of how it impacts this 2023 FSU football team, I think as long as you get your other kickoff returner, someone else maybe a little bit more stable than Deuce Spahn, and Spahn is your
Spahn.
No, I'm saying Spahn on the way they say on the broadcast. As long as you have someone else Deuce is your home run hitter, and then you have someone else more kind of a consistent at bat guy, I think you'll ultimately be fine. But yeah, I think some of the hand wringing going on doesn't make a ton of sense to me. It wasn't a huge part of your rotation this season. Best of luck to Winston. I'm assuming he's absolutely going to explore getting that final year and getting a medical waiver for 2022. So hopefully he ends up doing really well for himself. Okay, let's talk about recruiting. Zach, the first time in a long time FSU was back at Doak Campbell Stadium. That means the opportunity to host recruits. I don't think we really realized how big of a fact. We've talked about they didn't have that on campus recruiting momentum, but man, that really played a role in not having the kind of juice that you wanted on the trail, right?
I think so, because even for the LSU game, they had a ton of dudes there, but you can't really build on the on-field success if those guys can't talk to the coaching staff on that kind of trip. Yes, it was helpful to have those guys there and see the product on the field. FSU dominating a top opponent at the time, but Southern Miss isn't going to bring in a bunch of top-tier visitors. I mean, they could, but that's just probably not a good idea. Now you're in ACC play. You're facing some legitimate teams, teams that you should beat, but that are, more competitive. And, Doak's, close to sold out or sold out for the next however many games. I think Syracuse is the only game really in the near future that isn't sold out yet.
Oh, thank God for noon.
Yeah. I know I'm not happy about noon because that means I have to start driving earlier on Saturday. But yeah, I mean, I think it was a massive weekend for recruiting when it comes to just getting a bunch of dudes on campus. Florida State did an awesome job at that. I mean, I think to start, we got to go with their lone official visitor, LJ McCray.
Let's start
He
off with
hasn't,
that.
he has not been in Tallahassee since March. He was there for that legacy weekend. To be fair, he was at the LSU game, so he did watch FSU in person, but hasn't been in Tallahassee for a visit since that March trip. It started up on Friday, like we first reported. He stayed, arrived like midday on Friday. He went through a visit then, and then into Saturday for game day, and then finally wrapped things up on Sunday afternoon. Chris caught up with him there. I caught up with him after the game. I think the biggest thing is like the biggest news coming out of it is he has no other trips planned right now, and that his decision timeline is remaining the same. It's his commitment's likely to occur this month in October and after his birthday, which is on October 18th. So he said it's going to come sometime after that date. I think
he wasn't chopping any schools off the list either. So it's still Auburn, Florida State, Georgia, Miami, and Florida.
To me, it seems like an FSU, UF, and Georgia battle. I don't know if this is true, but like just reading like the Georgia boards and stuff, like it kind of seems like Georgia's fading a little bit, but I don't want to discount them. I don't know that to be 100% true either. Just from afar, looking at this recruitment, because honestly, like Florida State's been working here, but they haven't been a true factor in this recruitment for pretty much the entirety of the off season. Besides earlier on like January to March, like it seemed like they were a legit factor then. But after that, UF and UGA have been kind of back and forth in the lead position in this recruitment. The word out of this weekend is that FSU is caught up. I think FSU is right there with the top schools in his recruitment. I haven't heard that they're leading. I haven't heard that Florida State's exuding a ton of confidence here. But what I have heard is that FSU feels like they're right there. They're in striking distance, and I mean, it couldn't have come at a more perfect time, especially if he doesn't step foot on another campus. And if you look at, Miami's another factor in here. Like, I think they feel like they're, not being talked about enough in this recruitment, and they feel like they're a legit contender here. But I mean, LJ does pay attention to on-field success. Like, he has taken a ton of game visits. I don't think that's going to be the end-all be-all in this recruitment. But like, Miami has a tough stretch coming up. UF could lose a few more games this month. Like, FSU could do the same, but we feel pretty good about where Florida State stands on the field. I mean, Miami goes to UNC, then plays Clemson at home. I think UF has some tougher SEC games, so we'll see. But to me, like, I just like the way it's trending when it comes to visits and also just on-field play by each of the teams involved in his recruitment. Obviously, Georgia just had a monster win over Kentucky, and I expect them to continue to succeed. So, not trying to say that they're going to be down on the field, but I guess we'll see. Right now, I think it's too early to call. I don't even know if LJ McCray knows where he's headed yet, but the word coming out of the weekend, like I said, is that FSU feels like it's right there.
Couple footnotes to mention: Georgia in it for Aiden Breland, West Coast defensive lineman. He's deciding on October 14th. That one could play a role in numbers and situation here. Not that I think it's one or the other, because they're both pretty elite players. The other thing is also, you got to remember with McCray, dad's a longtime college football coach. Like, that kid's kind of well-versed in this whole thing. I think the decision is going to be a pretty mature, non-emotional type of one from him.
Yeah.
He's a pretty cerebral kid. Like, he's one of those kids that he thinks about answers. He thinks about what he's looking at. I think he likes flashy things like all 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, but I think he also understands the bigger things in play when you're selecting a college for football.
Yeah, I think that plays into FSU's favor a little bit, just because I think that's kind of what the coaching staff sells is, you know, real things. Whereas, like, I think other coaching staffs are a little bit more on the flashy side. I'm not saying that's going to hurt them in that recruitment, but yeah, I agree, Chris. Like, I think there were a ton of times where um, UF felt or UF pushed to try and get a commitment from him on various weekends. Like, I think at the end of July was one, maybe earlier on in the season. I think he was at that Tennessee game. That was a big win for them. He's not a guy that really gets caught up in the emotions of visits and, tries to make a decision off of that. Like, he's going to take his time this month, go through each of these schools, figure out which spot is the best fit for him, and that's where he'll head. So yeah, I think that's a really, honorable thing. Like, there's not a lot of kids that set up a commitment or set up an official visit, like with Florida State, where he took 4 OBs in the summer in June, and then he had this one scheduled for October, and he legitimately, waited to take this trip before making a decision. Like, that's rare in modern college football.
Basically stuck to his guns for like 6 months.
Yeah. And I'm sure, staffs at other schools were trying to get him to end his recruitment, and he did not, which I think is a positive thing for Florida State, and it just shows a lot about the kid.
I have a level of like enjoyment that this is considered for us. We've had a hard time getting a read on this recruitment. We're viewing it as this weird recruitment. It's actually just been a very like professionally like buttoned up kind of like normal recruitment.
But that is weird, right?
I mean,
it is weird for what recruiting is, which is weird. Yes.
Georgia seemed to surge in those late summer months going into the season, partly because Georgia loves big defensive linemen. Like, he is prototypical what they are now pursuing these days. 6'4" plus, large bodies, can play multiple positions. Florida's always been in there and largely talked about, especially because I think that's a campus he's probably stepped on the most. It's also one closest to home. He's got a good relationship with the staff there. Auburn, Miami shouldn't be dismissed. He's made sure to go out of his way to go see them. We both know their players in the NIL game. I don't know how much NIL is going to be a factor in this whole recruitment. And then there's FSU, who's been kind of a long-standing school involved in this recruitment. And, up till March had probably been the school that had done the best job recruiting them. And that kind of took a little bit of a side trail. And, well, here we are. We got him back on campus. You had your opportunity to make your last call with him. We'll see how it plays out.
I think if Chris Nee ran a university, LJ McCray would be committed there. I mean, Chris Nee was the first to that kid.
I think LJ McCray has everything it takes to be a high-level Sunday football player. He's got to become a better finisher as a pass rusher, but like a true 3-4 strong side defensive end at the NFL level. He is 270 right now, and he looks $1 million at that weight. Still moves very, very well at that weight while adjusting as any 18-year-old would be at that big of a body frame. But he's an excellent football player. Very good with his hands, good at getting off blocks, good at getting downhill, good at using his length, good against run, good against pass. Very, very high on him. Georgia tends to be pretty good at evaluating these type of things. It's kind of like, not that FSU isn't, but Ohio State evaluates receiver, I'm going to probably believe it. Georgia evaluates a defensive lineman, I'm probably going to believe it. Those schools have a recent track record that deserves credit to its own.
Also helps to have Jared Verse have his like breakout pass rush performance in person too. I think that's another like that work. A lot of things worked out well for Florida State this weekend, so we shall see. Not to bury the headline too, like there was another big time visitor on campus, your biggest commitment, and that was KJ Bolden. Zach, you guys were able to catch up. How did KJ enjoy the game?
He loved it. I mean, I wrote like in the headline, he felt like a celebrity because he literally, his mom posted like an Instagram reel, and it's literally just him, signing autographs, taking photos with a bunch of fans. He took a photo with Peter Warwick up in the Champions Club. I mean, he had a great time, him and his family. So just a cool moment for him to kind of come home. This is actually the first visit he's made since he committed to Tallahassee. He's been at 2 FSU games, but they're both away from Doak Campbell Stadium. His first time back, he talked about that. He's like, coming here uncommitted is great. Coming here committed is like nothing else. And he walks around and everyone's saying KJ Bolden. So just an awesome experience for him to come back, and he loved being around the coaching staff again. I asked him like, what he thought of Conrad Hussey's performance, and he's like, did you watch him in practice? He always makes those kind of plays, and he's saying like, hopefully we can make some plays together next year. So just a positive visit. I asked about other schools like Georgia and Auburn, the 2 programs he's visited so far this season. those were 2 trips that he told those schools that he was going to make before he committed to FSU. He did indeed, follow through on that. He said right now the only other trip that he thinks he's going to make to another school is for the Iron Bowl, just because it's a good game. That'll be, I think, at the end of November for Auburn, Alabama, obviously. And then he said he wants to come back for the Duke game if Riley Leonard is healed from his injury, because he wants to watch a good game. And then he'll definitely be back for the Miami game and possibly actually for the Syracuse game this upcoming weekend.
Getting him to show up. I think FSU's done a really nice job. Because remember we talked about that when he committed, like that the recruitment wouldn't necessarily be over, that there was still going to be a recruiting process. And you're doing the things right now that you need to do to kind of just reduce anxiety and be in a good spot here down the stretch. So that's good. What else? Anything else we want to add, Zach? Or there's a ton on Knowles 24/7. I want to direct people there to want to undercut the work you guys have done on the website this weekend.
Yeah, I'm just going to write like a good amount more over the week, stemming from the weekend. We got a ton of interviews after the game, on Sunday. We've written a bunch of them. So get over to the site. There's a ton to catch up on when it comes to recruiting for Florida State, especially in the 2025 class. FSU had some top targets on campus in that class. I'm going to write some more today and maybe do kind of a recruiting scoop piece at some point earlier in this week to kind of encapsulate the weekend.
Yeah, to highlight a few of the updates already up there, Jordan Boyd, Georgia Tech commitment, 24 kid, could be an edge rusher option for FSU, in addition to LJ McCray being there. That's a position where FSU's still got work to do in this recruiting class. 25, we've written a few. Carter Smith, talented quarterback. It'll be interesting how 25 quarterback goes. Tramel Jones is committed, and that's actually addressed in that article with Carter, where he talks about Tony Tokars and Mike Norvell and how they're handling that with transparency and such. Amari Adams.
Wait, can I ask you quickly, what's your opinion on that situation?
I think you keep evaluating. Okay, so those kids are playing their junior year of high school football. I think you keep evaluating. It is a critically important position in the success of football teams, maybe more so than anything else outside of maybe an edge rusher or left tackle type of body. But the quarterback's what makes the engine goes. You keep evaluating it. If you think Tramel is your dude, then you ride with it. If you think Carter's your dude, you go after it. If it's someone else, you go after it. If you think you need to take 2, you don't shy away from it. I think that's a position where, I understand you got to navigate it, because it's very easy to lose a kid because he hurt his feelings, or he felt like there was a promise of I'm the only one. And there's more. You have to do what you think is best for the program, because it's a position where you got to hit it consistently.
Even from a numbers perspective, like in 2025, correct?
Yes.
You will have Brock Glenn will be a redshirt sophomore. Luke Kromenhoek will be a sophomore redshirt freshman. And then you'll have Tramel Jones. So you're talking about 3 guys who are underclassmen. So is that likely? I know it's usually 3 to 4 quarterbacks on scholarship, but it depends. FSU has 4 right now, but also has 2 veteran ones. And if you probably would have been okay going into the season with 3, given what you had with Jordan and Tate. My point being is if you're going to go into season with 3, you're either probably going to have some kind of veteran. I don't think they're going to have a transfer come in though. So point being, I think you have a second guy in that 2025 class as it stands right now, just because you're trying to develop and you want to build depth if you don't have a whole lot of proven commodities at that point. We're way ahead though. That's a little ways. I think how I look at it.
I think you always recruit good quarterbacks. You never shy away from taking a guy who you think is a high level quarterback. I think they think Tramel Jones is a very good quarterback, very high level kid. They love him. They wanted him. They were happy to get his commitment. I'm not trying to dismiss him or diminish him. But I think Carter Smith's also viewed that way. I think George McIntyre, Jared Curtis, there's other guys out there that are viewed as very high-level quarterbacks. It's not the worst thing to make sure you have options going forward, and then you just be straightforward with the kids. If Tramel Jones asks you a question, answer it directly. If you're recruiting another kid, be very straight up about how you're going about your recruiting process. I think they're doing that based on conversations with each of those 2 in the past, and most recently with Carter. So I think that's how you go about it.
A weird portion to me, the only thing I want to note on this is I guess FSU made a promise to Tramel Jones that they're not going to have any other 2025 quarterback in Mike Norvell's office. So, I wrote that, or I transcribed that interview, the Carter Smith one, and he goes, yeah, Mike Norvell had to step away.
Yeah. He said that Carter said that they have a good relationship, him and Mike, but I think Dustin from No Game Day asked specifically about the meeting with Mike in the office, and he's like, didn't really have that. So yeah, it's interesting. But hey, if you give a kid your word, you got to be worth it.
To me, like, why do you have to make that promise? The kid, it's not like Tramel Jones is just locked in and not like Tramel Jones is visiting other schools.
He was at Florida a couple weeks ago, or
like why would FSU make? That's just me. Like, I'm just noting.
Is the promise that he can't be having a conversation in Mike Norvell's office, or just can't talk to Mike Norvell?
I don't know.
He can't. The promise is that he can't have a
conversation. We're podcasting nitpicking.
It's just weird to me. I'm sorry. I just wanted to note it. I think it's going to become
a I think it's wholeheartedly fair, Zach. And it is interesting with quarterback recruiting, but I think it's one of those positions where you got to be 100%. Like they are 100% with Luke Krumnock. They have felt that way for a long time, and I think they certainly got there back in the spring. And that thing ended 24 recruiting at that position entirely. I think for 25, they really like the guy they have committed, and they are committed to him. But like, you can't just be all in with 18 months ago before, or I guess at this point, more like 14 months ago before they potentially step on campus.
And there's a bit of there's a history. They moved on, or they didn't move on from. They opened up the board when Chris Parson was committed to take Brock Glenn. And that almost didn't work out, but it did. And they would have taken both quarterbacks. So like, they've shown that they're flexible with how they can recruit that position. If they see someone that they think will help them, they will go and they will adjust. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
But yeah, a lot of recruiting updates at the site.
Yeah.
All right. You guys want to get out of here?
Yes.
Okay. For Chris Nee, Zach Blostein, I'm Brendan Sinone. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll talk to you in a couple of days. This has been On the Bench. Bye. Sticking the freaking landing. Holy crap.
You sure?